Hi everybody, Rob here from Fry Studios, and I just wanted to finish the year by just saying thank you for bearing with me. I've not done anywhere near as much in the way of tutorials here as I wanted to. Next year is going to be a bit different. Things are calming down, and although I do have some travel planned, I should have some time put aside to do some training, which is what I enjoy doing and it's what this channel's all about anyway. So let me know what you want to see more of. I'm planning on doing more kind of entire process stuff, so kind of filming right through color grading, the whole lot, and then a bit of delivery. So I'm going to concentrate on cinema 4D, compositing, camera tracking, that kind of stuff, which I think is probably the bulk of what you guys want, but please let me know if I'm wrong. Anyway, just to say thank you, here's the final tutorial of the year, and it's just a kind of a festive thing, so if that's not your bag then apologies, but hopefully you'll still learn something from it. And the idea behind this tutorial, as you have seen from the example which I've just played, is to do something really basic but that looks quite nice, and I wanted to kind of get back to the fundamentals and just kind of show you what you can do with some very simple tools without having to dig deep, and think more about what the final result is. So that's my plan. Hopefully that's worked, and have a good holidays if you're having a holiday, and I'll see you all in the new year. Thanks very much. See ya. Bye bye. So here we are inside Cinema 4D, and I'll just play through the video once again, just so you can just get a recap on that. Okay, so what we have here is a kind of a folding open box, a bit of ribbon growing around, and you can see there's a slight camera move there. It just gives that extra depth as we've got the grass strands here. Even though they're mostly out of focus, they still really help to kind of sell the shot. And just looking at some of the materials, we've got a landscape object here with a snow material, we've got the grass, and then some very simple materials on the object here. Now, this is mostly driven by one texture, which is the snowflake pattern, which is a black and white texture, just driving the roughness channel. Now, that can be done in any renderer very simply, and I'll show you how I did it. But let's look at the scene. So here we have, let's start with the landscape. So we have a landscape material object. In fact, let's just start from scratch, shall we? Let's go new, and I'm going to add a landscape, and I'm going to turn off the borders at sea level, so I want it to just be flat. I'm going to decrease the size of it just a bit here in the height, but I'm going to make it a bit bigger, just so we've got some room to play with. Now, when I'm working with these landscapes, I like to have just a bit more detail, and this does vary slightly depending on the scene. So I'm going to click on the landscape, and I'm just going to increase the fine furrows, like so, and the deep ones, these rough furrows. But I'm going to change the scale slightly, so I'm going to increase that scale till I just like the look of it. So 0.17, pretty happy with that, that looks fine. And all I did for the material for this is, let's just create, now I did the final render, let's just go back to it, to that other scene. I did this in Octane, and it works in the same way. So the way we would set that up is, if we open up the Octane material, we can see that our diffuse is just the color, and we don't have any bump or anything. None of this is got anything in it at all. The only thing which is driving anything in here is the roughness, in which I have this texture file here, and this is a tileable texture of this snowflake pattern, and because this is a grayscale image, this is driving the amount of kind of roughness on this image. And when we see it in the final render, you can see how the snowflakes are affecting the reflection on there, or the shininess of that surface. The pink one is a similar, just a glossy Octane material. There's nothing fancy going on with it at all. And the grass is just a simple grass material with an opacity map. If I open that up, you can see that. Now these are Megascans objects and Megascans materials. You can see what's going on here. When you're using Octane, it doesn't preview very well in the viewport, but that's fine, because once you render it, it looks cool. And in here we have a diffuse texture. We can see this is the image texture. I have don't have roughness. I do have a normal. Actually, I'm not using normal on these. I'm using the opacity. I have a normal map available, but I think the reason I didn't end up using them is because they're so out of focus in the final shot. I wouldn't really have gained any benefit from it. So that's how the materials are set up. Lighting wise, I have a octane sky, and this has a simple HDR, which I just rotated a little bit to get it to shine on the right hand side. The camera is again, it's an octane camera, but it's just a simple, it's kind of similar to the physical camera, and it has a bit of depth of field, which is why we're just focusing on the present here. But the main kind of idea of this tutorial is to show you how the present works. Now I'm using an XREF here, so I have an XREF going back to, which is basically looking at my hard drive to see another animated file and just bringing it in here. Now you can open these up and see all the different elements, or you can just click open for edit, which will open that file inside its own kind of container, which is how I worked it. And what we have here is this really simple animation. So I'll show you how to make this, because this is kind of the idea behind this tutorial. So let's go new, and I'm going to add a plane. I'm not going to worry too much about the sizes here, because it's more about the process. This is what I want to show you. So just turning on Grid with lines here for the viewport, so you can see what I'm working with. Now for this, I only need it to be one polygon, so I'm going to turn that into one polygon. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm just going to drag out a copy here, and I'll call this, I'm just going to call this left or one, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to change this so it's on the x-axis there. I'm going to just drag it across to the edge. Now I'm not being overly precious about the location of it here, just because it doesn't really matter for this scene. I'm going to make it a bit smaller. Bring that across here, intersect that. Now I'm not going to make all the other sides yet, because what I want to do is just make this give it enough geometry to be able to deform it. I'm going to make it editable, although you don't necessarily have to. And I'm going to add a bend deformer, which I'm going to add to that left hand side here. Now if we go fit to parent, that's now the size of that plane. I might make it a bit thicker on the X here, just because it helps me visualize what I'm doing. Now if we change the strength here, you'll see that bends over quite nicely, and I want to, on frame 0, have this bent pretty much all the way around like this. So the way to do that is to just click on the keyframe for the strength like this, and I'm going to go forward about just under a second. So I'm going to go to 20 frames. Actually, before we do anything, let's just set our frame rate. So if you hit Control D, that brings up your project settings, and I'm going to change my frames per second to 24. And while I remember, I'm just going to go to my render settings, and I would do the same here. So I would change this to 24 frames per second here as well. And I'm not going to render this scene, but I like to show that just because it makes sense. Okay, so let's go back to the bend. Now on frame, let's say frame 20, I'm going to bring this right back up to well over my kind of finish point, and I'm just going to keyframe that. Now, actually, let's make this one full second, just so that it makes more sense. I'm going to go back. So we have this animation, point to point, but it's a bit lifeless. So let's go to frame 18, and let's take that bend and whack it back up, maybe even a little bit more extreme, like so. And now we can see it bends back like that. Now let's move forward, say 3 frames, and go back just past. So this is adding just a little bit of bounce. And then we'll go to frame, just another 2 frames on, and we'll put this to 0, keyframe that. And if we just play through, we'll see we should have this bend itself out with a little bit of bounce at the end. Okay, that's pretty good. I might want to stretch it out though, but instead of trying to mess around with these keyframes here, I'm just going to go to Window, and I'm going to go to Timeline Dope Sheet. And you can see, if I bring this in, you can see our keyframes here. Now, if we want to just extend this kind of proportionally, we can grab the end handle here and we could stretch it out. And if we play through this, we'll now see what that does. That doesn't quite work for me, so I'm actually going to bring that back, and I'm going to just maybe shorten the whole thing and add a slight more bit of bounce at the end. So I think it's these last ones which don't quite work for me. Let's just stretch them out. Yeah, that's better. I am going to add one final bit of bounce, so let's just, so we go to here, forward, actually going to move that forward just one tiny bit more. So let's keyframe that, and then 3 frames more, and now I'm going to go to a 0 angle. Okay, so one side done with a bit of bounce. Now that's looking pretty good. It's actually taking a little bit too long though. I think the overall timing of this is way too long, and it should take about a second to do this. If I go back to my dope sheet, I'm going to grab all of these keyframes and I'm going to take these back to maybe touch over a second. Let's go for about 30 frames. I think that's probably better. Okay, rewind, press play. Yes, I like that. Okay, so happy. Now we have this one side done. So let's grab it and let's just drag out a copy, and we'll call this one, that should probably be front or back, it doesn't really matter. And let's just grab it as an object here and rotate. Now, don't know where my handle's gone. Oh yes, I do. It's because I pressed that shortcut earlier. So Alt D brings that back. So apologies for that if you're following along with my idiocy. Okay, just hold Shift to constrain this, and I'm just going to move it into position around here. Now you probably noticed in my example that I had, I'm just going to duplicate this 2 more times while I chat. I had some intersection as these kind of bend into each other. And I don't think that was too much of a problem. It kind of sits fine with me with the style of this piece. If you didn't want that to happen, it'd be very easy to just time them so that they didn't intersect, but I'm not going to worry about it. It didn't bother me at all. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this last one out like so, rack it into place. And if I play through these, we should see that we have a nice box building itself into position. But they're all going to move at the same time. So that kind of works. It kind of does the thing, but it's not all that exciting. And if I just pull back here, you can see that what I was talking about, this intersection as the top happens here. They kind of crease into each other. Now, I will show you a quick way to deal with that, which I didn't bother with because it didn't really affect my end result. I didn't mind it too much. Okay, now I'm just going to rename these. So that one there is going to be right, and if I go for the next one, that's going to be back. Again, I should probably have numbered these because this doesn't really mean too much. Okay, so I'm going to take a taper. I think it's probably the best thing here, and if I add that to my left hand one, let's just turn these off for a second. Oops. And we'll take our taper and we're going to fit it to the parent. I'm going to make it a bit bigger in the X again, just so I can see it more clearly in my viewport. And if I just bring that in, let's go to a good frame. So if we taper that about so much here, now you'd need to be a bit more accurate as you're doing this for your own project, but let's take it to about frame 26 and keep it tapered the same, and then we'll move to frame 32 and have 0 taper. Now if I just bring back that front one just so we can see what's going on, we should find that although there's still intersection as this one moves in, it's just helping a little bit. So in fact we could even do that some more. We could taper that much, and we'd do the same for this front one. Let's grab another taper. I'll just do the two so you can see one corner of what I'm doing here. And if I come to, let's just fit to parent, a bit bigger in that direction. Okay, let's find where they intersect the most, which is here. Let's bring that back to about there. And then by this point it needs to go back down to 1. Keyframe that. And now it shouldn't intersect as much. Now that first one I think needs to be adjusted just a little bit more. Let's go like so. Re-keyframe that. Go to here, increase that. Keyframe, and then obviously need it to go back to 0. Like so, just keyframe that. Okay, and now we should find that they kind of spring into place. I'd probably want to refine this a little bit more, but this is just really to show you if you don't want them to intersect, this is quite a cool way of doing it. Let's bring back our others so you can compare the two corners. And so this corner over here is not going to intersect and this corner will. See which you prefer. I don't mind the intersection myself, but it kind of works. Anyway, let's move on. So my biggest problem with this, in fact I'm going to kill off those tapers. I'm not a fan. They kind of work, but let's just delete them. Like I say, I didn't need them for mine. I didn't feel they were necessary. What I do think is necessary though is adding a bit more personality to this, because it's all a little bit kind of flat and lifeless. So let's go back to our dope sheet. If we have a look here, we can see that we've got all of them and they're all identical. Because we just cloned them by control clicking and dragging the copies out, they're all exactly the same. So the keyframe position's all duplicated as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into this bend, which is the second one, and I'm going to drag that out, make it a bit longer. This one here I'm going to drag it just a little bit longer. But I'm also going to take some of these other keyframes here and I'm going to change the time of them by dragging them back. And then this last one I'm going to make really snappy for the first half, and then I'm going to stretch it out a little bit for the second half to about there. And this is really just to, so they're all going to sit within the same kind of a window, but the timing of each is going to be a bit different, which I think will add a bit of personality to them all. So let's have a look and see how that works out. See, that's much more interesting. It gives you a bit more variety to look at, which works really quite well. And this is how I did mine. I think it works nicely, it looks cool, and I was very happy. So moving on from those sides, what I did is I took just a regular box and I just increased the size until it was just a little bit bigger than the end point here. Lifted it up. Let's shorten it because it's a lid. It's going to sit like that. That's fine, like that there. Make it editable, and if I just flip underside, I'm just going to take that bottom polygon and just delete that. By the way, if you can't see my keyboard, it's because I'm using a Wacom Cintiq for this, and the Cintiq engine, which means that I'm using a soft keyboard, which is kind of down here, just off the bottom of the screen. I will try and remember to tell you any shortcuts I'm using, but basically I was just backspacing to delete that polygon. Okay, so what we need to do is find the point where the box has finished building itself, about there, and move on just a couple of frames, and I'm going to take this lid object and make sure that my parameters are all turned on here for recording, and hit keyframe. that's my kind of resting position for it. That's where I want it to stay. So now I'm going to go back to the start point for it, which will be roughly around, I don't know, half a second in, let's say 12-14 seconds, somewhere around there. And I'm going to lower it down just below the level of the box, like so, and I'm going to scale it down until it's pretty much invisible. I'm going to keyframe that and just make sure that that has worked. So you can see there, if I just rotate around like so, if I drag through my timeline, you can see that lid popping up. Now again, we have the similar problem of this being just a little bit lifeless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up, I'm going to go back to maybe say frame 34, and I'm going to lift this right up above the box, keyframe it there, and now we should have it fly up and then sit back on as it expands in size. So that in itself actually looks alright. That doesn't look too bad, but I think what we should do is have just a little bit of twist. So let's go to this keyframe where it sits fine, go back to that keyframe there, the previous one. I'm going to give it a bit of a twist this way, about 60 odd degrees. Let's just remember to keyframe it and go back to this keyframe, and I'm going to ramp it around the other way, about a similar amount. Now when I play it, we should get a kind of a spring up and spring back. And I think what I'll do is similar to what I did with these sides and just give it a bit of bounce. So down like that, give it a bit of a twist, not too much, keyframe, a couple of frames more, bring it back to say there, and another frame, bring it roughly into position. So let's just come into the rotation here, and I'm just going to type in 0, which will be fine for that. Okay, so let's make sure it's keyframed, and let's just play through. I'll just deselect everything so I can see what's going on. Okay, that looks cool. Again, I'm going to go into my dope sheet and just play with the timings a little bit here. So I'm going to take this cube, I'm going to move all of that back so that it happens a bit more snappily. I'm going to move the entire duration of the animation for the cube, for the lid, I'm going to just shrink a little bit, so it just makes it that bit snappier. There's something a little bit off about it I'm not completely happy about. I think actually the rotation might be better off if it all happens in one direction. So let's just see what we've got. Yeah, so let's go that way. So let's spin that round about 180 degrees ish, and then play through that again. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, let's play it. Yeah, I'm going to take this last set of maybe 4. Oops. I'm going to take these keyframes here, and I'm just going to extend them. I think they happen just a little bit too fast. It's more, it felt more like a stutter than a nice bounce. Might be too much. Play through again, and I find oftentimes when I'm doing this kind of work, it's part of it is kind of your gut, and you'll get the first kind of 80% quite quickly, and then it's just a case of sitting in and refining and playing, just tweaking. Anyway, I won't bore you anymore with this. This is just my process. So that's all looking pretty good. I think I missed a keyframe out here. Let's just bring that back roughly there. Okay, so let's just grab all of this, and should we just put that in a null, just to keep it tidy. So I'm going to call this box. Let's just rename that. Okay, so the box is done, and now what I need is a ribbon. So I'm going to take a rectangular spline here and a sweep, and then I'm going to need a profile. So I'm just going to go into a front view, and I'm going to do this a bit basically. I did it a little bit more complex in the final thing, but I'm just going to take my pen tool, and I'm going to grab a few points here, just drag that down to there, and I'm oops, just undo that one. Okay, right, so got those points. I'm just going to take these, actually let's just take top and bottom, right click, and I'm just going to go down to chamfer. I'm just going to round these just a little bit, like so, and then I'm going to do the same with these other points. Right click, chamfer, just click and drag to the right. You can come in here to the radius setting and do something a bit more extreme if you need to, which I think for this particular example works quite well, just to soften them up. And the only reason I'm doing this is so that it flows up around the lid, because the lid's a bit bigger. Okay, so let's come in here. Let's look at my rectangle. And I'm going to sweep my rectangle. So that goes first under the sweep along that spline. Now, obviously, this is ridiculously big, so let's make this a bit smaller. Let's take my scale tool, just scale this down. Now, I'm going to stop about there for using the scale tool, and then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to change the it's going to be the width to make this a little bit more ribbon-like. Okay, so here we have it, and you can see there's something odd going on underneath. So let's grab this and go back to the spline, and you can see that I've just got these points here wrong. So I'm going to grab those, lift them up like this, so they sit just under my box. There we go, that's better. And what I do is I'm only going to show you the one here. We only need to see one, so wait until the lid is settled, and I'm going to take my sweep and choose my end growth to keyframe just beyond that point. So let's find where the lid stops, go just a few frames further, hit end growth at 100%, and I'm going to go back to about probably about frame 35, and I'm going to go 0 keyframe, and then let's just play it through. We might need to do some tweaking to line this up. Actually, that worked pretty well. So I'll just play that through again so you can see as the lid comes in, the ribbon then wraps itself around. And similarly to what we did with the sides of the box, I'm just going to, let's drag that down, just control click and drag one out to create a duplicate, and let's just rotate this 90 degrees, and there we have it. Now I would probably do the same again. Let's go to Window, Dope Sheet, and just offset one from the other. And you can grab this yellow bar at the top here just to change the whole setting. So I might just move that one just to the right so it happens a bit later, but then I might just change the final keyframe just to make it slightly shorter so that the duration of the two ribbons is slightly different as well. And actually this is looking pretty cool. Now for the little bow on top, all I did was something very similar. So let's take one of these sweeps, and I'm just going to rename this so I know what it is, ribbon, and I'll just do the one and then duplicate it to show you. But what we need to do here is we need to grab a circle spline. So if we come in here and get rid of our rectangle spline and drag in our circle spline, let's make this an awful lot smaller. Now that's obviously going in the wrong place. That's because I've done it the wrong way around. I need the rectangle to stay in there because it's the rectangle that's going to go around the circle. So let's drag that there. This one comes out. In fact, that one could just be deleted. So we've got our similar rectangle as we did in the previous ribbon, and now we've got our circle, which is, if I lift it up, going to be too big and also not look overly pretty. So let's reduce the size of the circle to about there. That's fine. I'm going to just center this so you can see it a bit more clearly. Now The circle spline as it is not all that great, because it doesn't really have much in the way of personality. So let's make it editable, and in point mode I'm just going to grab the top point of it. I'm just going to drag that down like so. Now that looks better, but it's still not great, so I'm going to drag the point there, and there's a point there. If we look in the front view here, we can see these 2 points, this one and this one. If I right click and just go to soft interpolation, that rounds them very slightly. And if you go into one of the move tools, let's just zoom in. You should be able to grab this handle and just manipulate that to make it just a bit softer and smoother. Do the same over this side and get it like that. Let's take this one. I'm going to make this just a little bit shorter, like so, and I'm just going to change it so that it kind of affects one side slightly differently to the other, and that helps give it a bit of personality as well. Okay, so in the same vein as before, we just need to animate this end growth, which has already got some keyframes in it, and you can see that wraps itself around, but it's just a little bit too early. The actual animation of it's fine, but all we're going to do is I'm just going to drag keyframes to the right, and I want that first keyframe to line up to this point here, so let's grab that, and then as this ribbon passes over the other one, it should start to build our little bow on the top. So I'm kind of happy with that. Might be nice if it started at the same level. I'm not going to worry about that now. You can time that yourself very easily. All you would do is change the start growth. You can see that could go to, say, here. In fact, let's just do it. Let's take the start growth to there and go to the end and change the start growth to there. And now if we back out, let's look at our scene. Actually, now I've changed the start growth, I need to change the end growth. So as you've probably noticed, I've made a few little mistakes along the way. I don't like to edit these out, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather you saw me making mistakes and see how I deal with them. And to be fair, they're only little things. There we go, that looks quite cool. Alright, so happy with that. Let's take it back. Let's just go. Now you can also see that there's a frame, or there's a 1 frame's worth, maybe 2 frames worth of animation of the growth here, which is always visible. So I need to come back, and it's because I couldn't see it under this ribbon here. I need to come back and just change that start growth keyframe. And now, much better. Okay, so we have this file. What we need to do is we just need to go to save as and choose a location for this. Okay, let's just go desktop, and I'll just call this, let's go festive tutorial, xrefs, and I'll call this gift cube, and then I'll just rename it to gift 2. That's fine. Okay, now if we go back to our other scene, which was our untitled scene here, instead of having loads of keyframes popping up and our dope sheet getting really messy, all we need to do is, if we just go to create xref, add an xref here, and within this xref we can go to references, and then I can just choose gift 2, open that, and then that whole object is in our scene encapsulated in its own xref. We can very easily come in here and open for edit, and then every time we save it, if we just reload, any saves or any changes that have been saved will update in here. So we can have that doing its thing and looking pretty funky. Now I'm not going to go into the materials. I'm going to do some Octane material setup kind of tutorials for you in the new year, but I really wanted to just kind of show you how you can do something really quite quick and easy. Now this has taken what, about 30 minutes for me to go through the whole process. if I wasn't trying to think about it and talk through it, it'd probably take you all of about 15 minutes to actually build that yourself, maybe 20 minutes, which isn't bad to get that kind of an end result. Now, let's just play through this again so we can see how it looks. And I think it's fair to say that's a quite a pleasing little animation for no time and no real kind of deep knowledge needed. It's all very, very simple, very basic, but it works. Anyway, I hope that's been of some use. Please let me know if I waffled too much. Again, like I said, I haven't done many tutorials this year, so I've probably ummed and ahed more than I normally do, but I'm gearing up. I've got a whole course which I'm writing, which you'll find on Udemy quite soon. Yeah, so have a good holidays, and I'll see you all in the new year. I've been Rob Redman. Thanks very much. Bye bye.